Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Reputation Today PrimeTime. This is a special edition with Global Indians. The Reputation Today 20 Global Indians list and this panel discussion are powered by Wordsworth Communications Consulting. My name is Anubhuti Mathur, and I am the content director at the Promise Foundation, which runs Reputation Today and Comms News, along with Praxis, Spectra, and online events like these. On behalf of the team at Promise Foundation, I welcome all of you today. Reputation Today announced its list of 20 global Indians, the class of 2022, last evening. Congratulations to all. This is the third year in a row we are bringing out this list. Our panelists today are part of the list. Today, among other things, our panelists will focus upon what goes into preparing for and succeeding in an international role. We are sure all of you will benefit immensely from the discussion today. Before we begin, we would like to thank Wordsworth Communications Consulting for their support over the years. The hashtag for today is hashtag RTPrimeTime. Tweet away your learnings using the hashtag and don't forget to tag us at RepTodayMag and our partner at Wordsworth CC. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel bit.ly RT on YT for more such online events and beneficial content. Without further ado, let me invite the panelists for today. Please welcome Anubha Pandey, Head of APJ Analyst Relations and Integrated Communications for Southeast Asia and Korea at VMware. She's joining us today from Singapore. Bharat Ramanan, Principal Advisor, International Affairs and Political Risk at Rio Tinto. He joins us today from London. Karun Arya, Vice President, Group Corporate Affairs at Orient, and today he's joining us from Singapore. And Michelle Samuel, Global Internal Communications Lead at Mondelez International, and today she's joining us from Chicago. And Arpan Basu, Strategic Communications Director for Eurasia and Middle East at Coca-Cola. He is located in Dubai. Moderating the panel discussion today is Neha Mathur Rastogi, founder and CEO at Wordsworth Communications Consulting. Over to you, Neha, now.
Thanks a lot, Anubhuti. As always, it's a pleasure to be part of this process of recognizing these incredible global Indians in the world of PR. This year is no such exception. And when I was just seeing the profiles of the incredible people we have here today, it felt so good to be part of this amazing lot of people here today, and we want to hear more from them. And I promise you, they'll be doing most of the talking today for sure. I just feel that this is one profession which is still yet to be understood by so many people, and there's so many layers to it. And just the people sitting in front of you today represent completely a diverse set of skills when it comes to what all they're doing in their profession. So I wanted to quickly go around the table today to first briefly understand what you're doing, what your role is in your current organization. What's the journey been so far for you to be called a global Indian and have this well-deserved recognition as well? So why don't we start with Bharat? If we could just get a quick introduction to yourself, your role, and the journey so far as a global Indian. Bharat, you'll need to unmute yourself if that's possible.
Sorry,
Yes.
one thing that I haven't learned is how not to be technologically challenged. But thank you very much, Nia, and to everybody else. It's lovely to be a part of the panel with such distinguished professionals. I work for Rio Tinto, one of the world's largest mining companies, and I lead the international affairs and political risk area of expertise, essentially. And this essentially encompasses most of the company's relationships with governments, multilateral agencies the world over. With the view, of course, to make sure that our interests in several countries that we operate in are maintained. But in addition, how do you move to new markets? How do you access new markets as well? And the political risk piece is ingrained into this because you can't move into new markets or even manage risks in existing markets if we don't understand how political systems function. And then the piece attached to that, of course, is what happens after you've understood all of this. How do you action all of these items? And that's the strategic engagement side of things, which more often than not is not necessarily something that I sort of jump into because it's very, very localized. You need to have people on ground managing that stuff, and that happens as a result of our country teams. But the overall strategic piece is what I look at, and that should be perhaps a short introduction. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bharat. Very interesting. And I'll come back to your expertise in this particular area to understand it better. Moving on to Anubha. Anubha, you've been in Singapore for a while now, as you said. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Sure, Neha. So, firstly, thank you for having me here. So, I've been in Singapore for now 17 years, in communications for a good 20 over years. Um, uh, I currently work with VMware, which is a technology company. So, essentially, any infrastructure that runs most of your platforms, devices, cloud technologies is run on the VMware Foundation, and pretty much along the front line of innovation. So, in my role, I take care of communications for the Southeast Asia and Korea region, and also manage analyst relations, all APJ. I'm based in Singapore, and from here, being the central part for most of the Asian region, it's fun and an opportunity to work with as many as 25 countries in region.
Thanks, Anubha. And another member from Singapore joining us today is Karun. Karun, tell us about your work in fintech and how long you've been there as a global Indian.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on this panel. I've been in Singapore for about 12 years now, so a fairly long time, and currently lead corporate affairs at Oriente, which is a fintech company headquartered out of Hong Kong. They're mainly in the buy now, pay later space, which has obviously been booming around the world over the last few years, and I think has taken off massively in Asia in more recently over the last 18 months or so. It continues to be an exciting sector. I think fintech generally. In my role, I kind of lead the entire sort of corporate affairs mandate, which includes traditional sort of PR, as well as marketing and stakeholder engagement. Over the last sort of 18 months or so through COVID, that's also sort of moved more into sort of partnerships and corporate development, which I particularly find very interesting. I think there's a lot of impact that people in the corporate affairs space generally can drive as well. Apart from that, I have a keen interest in sort of the crypto and Web3 space, which is blowing up at the moment. There's a lot of innovation happening there as well, and I think that's going to continue to be a core focus for me moving forward. But yeah, excited to be here and excited to sort of see what everyone has to say as well.
Thanks a lot, Karun. And now a quick stopover in Dubai. Arpan, how are you doing? Coca-Cola, how's the journey been so far? You've been there for
about 8 odd years now, and in those 8 years, I've had like a spectrum of roles that I've been in. In India, I used to lead the communications for India and Southwest Asia. In this role, I lead strategic communications for Eurasia and Middle East. So that's a total of 25 countries. But essentially, what we do is we set the agenda for how you want to see the narrative of the company play out, both internally and externally, and how do we get people to sort of propagate and be our mouthpieces on our behalf. So I think that's what largely the agenda is. A large part of the role, like Bharat said, is also analyzing risk and sort of positioning yourself for it, because this part of the world is little infamous for all the incidents that happen. We are pretty much sitting in the war zone of the world, and to be prepared all the time is also less, I think. So
Yeah, I think it's a daily job in terms of how the dynamics are shifting these days, where as far as strategy is concerned, it's shifting as fast as the world dynamics, I guess. And then last but definitely not the least, Michelle, happy to have you here with us today and super excited to hear more about your role at Mondelez and what you're doing over there. Your designation speaks very interesting. So would like to know more exactly where you're coming from and what your experience is like.
Yeah,
Yes.
there we are. Okay, hi, all. I'm really, really thrilled to be here with all of you. I think I'm excited to share, to learn, and to take some of your questions. Just a little bit about me. I've been working in global communications and in public affairs across industries, mainly being in food and ag and in consumer goods. I've had the opportunity to work on what I like to say iconic brands and companies, right from P&G to Monsanto to Bayer, and now with Mondelez. I think more our brands seem to be more famous than the companies. So you may be familiar with Cadbury, with Oreo, Tang, Five Star, etc., and the list goes on. I have done, like I said, a variety of roles throughout my time, right from external, internal to social change to transformation, a bit of public affairs and industry affairs, and so on and so forth. Right now, I lead the global internal comms for Mondelez. That means that I work with a lot of the regional as well as the global communication team. It is an interesting role because it's not just, I think the world has moved and changed so much. I think never has communication been an integral part. And I think the more that you think about whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it is, the whole return to office. I think the world has changed so much over the past five years. A lot of the companies are going through transformations, through mergers, and I think the role of internal communications and helping and enabling the organization to join the dots between the purpose, the culture, and the strategy. I think it's just evolved. It has evolved so much as I think back about the time since I was in India, and then the journey henceforth. As part of my role, I also work with our executive team. Right on, right from what they have to say to different set of stakeholders. While it's a very broad role that has a big element of social to it, as well as we partner very very closely with the external com. So it's quite, so the lines are blurry because it is all encompassing. It has the region work as well as the global, and not to say that we work a lot with our functions, which I think play a critical role in how do you connect to our people in the plants as well as sales, who are what we call the network in many cases. So it's a very interesting piece, but I think what I love about this is we are on a journey of transformation and helping the organization to understand what is the strategy and how can we help them to get there, irrespective of where you sit in organization. I think is an interesting piece of challenge there. I'm currently based in Chicago, but I am from Bombay, and my journey began from India with Monsanto. Then took up a regional role in Singapore, and then took up a global role when I moved to the headquarters in St. Louis. And the last year is when I took up this new role with Mondelez and have moved now to Chicago, which I absolutely love. But I started off in a PR agency, which I highly recommend. I'm a big fan of starting with the agency. You learn your ropes, and in the good old days, we used to scan the newspapers and cut those clippings and stick it and send it to the client. And I'm sure that I think things have changed now. I don't know, it's been a while, but yeah. And then I switched over to the corporate side. So I'll say that it has certainly been an interesting journey, not just professionally, but also I think one of self discovery and what you value a lot in your life. So I'm
Thank
excited to
you
be
so
here.
much. Thanks, Michelle. And I think you brought up a really important point. I think all of us present here, and I'm still on the agency side and decided to start one of my own, of course, a couple of years ago, is that that rigor that you get from being in an agency to begin with really helps to build a really strong foundation and move on from there. But just to understand how easy or difficult is that shift from agency to corporate, and I think that requires a bit of myth busting as well, because a lot of people have very different impressions of, oh, corporate life is easy, and when you want to slow down is when you want to move into a corporate world, and little do we know that it is so complex and layered in its own ways and its own challenges. So Karun, if you could just talk a bit about that and basis your own experience of the switch over to corporate and how that is like in reality.
Sure, I think that's I mean, it's a really interesting question. It's also one I've kind of run away from because Oriente, I consider it to still be a startup, even though it's sort of a pretty big startup at the moment. But when I joined the company, it was, I don't know, it was like 110 people or something, and I think we're at 1,200, 1,400 people now across the region. But I think it's always been interesting, going. I mean, I went from a corporate to a startup, back to the corporate side with Discovery, and then back to a startup with Oriente. And I think for me personally, it was just, I think the startup culture is really exciting. Obviously, as startups, they grow as quickly as they do, and that pace of transformation is much more accelerated than it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. Um, you have to evolve just as quickly, right? I mean, the needs of that organization changes, the risks, the communication needs, the public policy needs, and typically startups, they are also in a disruptive sort of mindset where you are breaking things, and not just things internally as a company as you try and iterate and evolve your product or service, but you're breaking laws and your regulations, and those have to play catch up with the technology that you're innovating. And I think that is kind of the hardest challenge, is just figuring out that balance. And also, as I think Michelle was saying, the lines are so blurred in the space that we all operate in, where you have to be working hand in hand with public policy or stakeholder engagement. You have to be working hand in hand with marketing, to have that one strong voice in the mix. And I think I've just been lucky in the positions I've been to maybe made the right choices, and some people would say I've made the wrong choices in my career. But each of them has helped me evolve, and each of them has taken me to a new industry. And I think at where I am now in fintech is probably one of the most exciting industries globally, where you're seeing an incessant amount of innovation. And I think that the opportunity for innovation will is continues to be immense moving forward, because earlier it was every company is becoming an e-commerce company. Now every company is becoming a fintech company. Fintech companies are becoming other things, but at the core of everything is finance in a way. And I think the space I'm in, and where we continue to see I wouldn't even say the innovation, this merge that you're seeing with Web3 and crypto, that opens doors and windows to a completely new sector as well. And we're very, very early stage in that. So, I think being nimble, being agile, and being open to change is probably, my biggest takeaways from this evolution that you're seeing, whether it's in startups or moving between startups and corporate worlds.
Absolutely. No, and you're right. And I had a question just linking back to that was, I mean, how important or how useful is it to be specialized in a certain field when it comes to communications as well? And I know, Anubha, you've been doing a lot of tech. I think it's been quite tech oriented. For Bharat, it's been more completely rather on the policy side of things. So, from the two of you, I do have this question, and maybe we can start with Anubha saying, is it the right move, and does it help even when you're looking at global career building in terms of being specialized in communications in certain fields?
Yeah, great question, Neha. So I've had this conversation many a times, and I think initially when we start off with a career, right, you need to be nimble. You need to try and work and experiment your way through all types of stuff, right? Whether it is lifestyle brands, whether it is retail spaces, corporate B2B tech, and stuff like that. Very interestingly, from all the portfolios that I handled, right, and I've been in the agency environment for 17 years before I then made a switch to the corporate side. Um, it was there was this softer corner for B2B tech. I think the front end and the ability to lead with innovation and enable the possibilities, enable us to live through that, the future that we want to see for ourselves and experiment that. I found that very fundamental in what tech companies offer, which is helping businesses walk the talk, helping businesses imagine possibilities. And the very fact that we're all sitting here from various parts of the world, and so many of us are trying to learn more, that is possible because of technology and an infrastructure that's supporting this, right? So that has always excited me, and I found that irrespective of what I was working on, I had a softer corner for B2B. And because of that, I also felt that in terms of the approach in communications, quite a bit was archaic, because people felt that it's not a consumer brand, so it's not that fun, it's not very consumer, you can't do. So that was the challenge. That was the next thing which I felt, hey, let's have fun with this. So this fun that I was trying to find and figure out got me more and more sucked into different elements of B2B tech, which is what I grew into. And because of that softer corner, I think I've been very fortunate before moving to VMware. I was heading the tech practice at the Omnicom Public Relations Group, Flashman Hillard. So, so there you had a whole different set of different types of technologies and technology companies to play around with. For me, that gave me the canvas to look at the opportunities, to look at how we can extend in a truly integrated format, whether it's dealing with customers, whether it's dealing with partners, whether it's dealing through media, whether it's through social, creating that layer of possibilities for one and all. So I thoroughly enjoy that. And for me, uh, that passion for B2B tech and the ability to kind of get continued opportunities helped build and strengthen and experiment a lot more in that space.
Right.
Yeah.
And excellent. And Bharat, moving on to you, I mean, you've been looking at policy for a long time, and now it's moved on from country level to a very macro level as well. So, how does that work? And, how do you wear that lens from such a macro perspective when you're looking at it from a global perspective and not looking at it country to country? You'll have to unmute again, Bharat. That's fine. That's fine.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting this damn thing. Also, a signal that I've not really been chained to the computer as many others have been during the pandemic. But I think the first point I'd want to say is that what Anubha said is absolutely right. So I think there should be a broad base that you sort of plunge into when you finish university or college or whatever, and then start working towards something that really interests you. Sometimes it might be a little spark, but then it's a spark that you should feed. And over time, it starts to become something that's bigger. And I'm living proof of the fact that I studied a whole bunch of other things, thought I'll do something else, and I've landed up doing something quite different. But I will say that when it comes to political risk, which is what I do now, it's obviously very much driven by how well you understand countries, how well you understand political systems, and how well you understand how to communicate to, let's say, a government, or a government to its people, or a government to the multilateral donor agency, of its priorities and its requirements. So I think on the whole, if your nature is curious, and you're interested in a particular topic, you will go the distance to try and find ways to innovate within that space. And so I think that's the difference between doing it at the country level and the global level. Because at the global level, what happens is you cannot get into the weeds of every single matter, for which you have people on ground doing so. But you have to be able to join and triangulate things, triangulate trends. For example, with everything that's happening today in Ukraine and Russia, one of the biggest things that comes up in our conversations, at least in this industry, is what does this mean for global trade on the whole? How do you triangulate what this could mean for global trade on the whole, and what can that mean for your business as a result? And once you have the answers to that, I don't claim to have the answers to that, but once you do have a fairly good sense of how that works, you will go back to the drawing board and say, okay, these are the few things that we need to do in key markets A, B, C. And so that's when you start walking into that, sort of taking a deep dive into a country. But otherwise, for someone like me, the job really is to keep looking for trends, keep spotting areas where we think we need to sort of like recalibrate, readapt, and re-engage. In some cases, we've stopped engaging because we don't really see too much benefit. But the more you start thinking about it from a trends perspective, trends scenarios perspective, I think you start making those connections. And I think that's how they differ between the country level and the global level. And to a large extent, all of this is driven by your fundamental foundation, where you are exposed to a variety of different things, which automatically, I think, brings about curiosity. And then you start plunging into something that you really feel, passionate about, or you're interested in. And that's really how I've done it. Thanks.
That's great, actually, Bharat. That's really interesting. And, in some cases, we have the advantage of deep diving early in our careers and sticking to that sector and really building ourselves up from there. And in some cases, that may not be true as well. I mean, Arpan, from what I understand, you were in a completely different sector altogether before you got into working with Coca-Cola. So, how was that shift for you? And how easy or difficult is it? Are there advantages to come from some such diverse set of sectors and then putting all those learnings together, or there are some challenges as well?
Interestingly enough, I never planned for it. It just happened. I started off with a PR agency, moved on to a chamber of commerce, moved on to a pharmaceutical company, and then to a life insurance company, and now to non-alcoholic ready to drink industry. So this whole thing of shifting across industries. I mean, it's funny that I have never been in the same industry twice. I've always gone into some other industry. But what it essentially does, in my mind and out of my experience, is that it broadens your horizon to a large extent. So not only do you get to, and part of being in the communications field is also that you get to know the business very well. And unless you understand the business very well, you will not be able to sell the business to whoever you want to sell the story to. So understanding the business is very important. And by virtue of being in so many different industries, I think I've gained a fair amount of knowledge about the various industries, and that's helped. It's helped in two ways, really. One, you get exposure and you come to know how different industries operate. Of course, things evolve, and what the pharma industry used to be 10 years ago is no more the same pharma industry. But the basics still remain the same. And the other is that it broadens your horizon and it lets you get expertise from other industries into your current industry. So, for example, when I was with the life insurance company, they did a lot of things uniquely, which perhaps the FMCG industry didn't. So it helps you to sort of cross pollinate and cross leverage learnings from across industries. I think that's a big plus and a big advantage. And even for the company, they get a fresh perspective, a fresh mind, somebody who's not bogged down with what is already happening in the industry and getting caught up in the regular norms and trends of the industry. So for anybody to bring in fresh perspective, it's always a good change.
No, absolutely. I think that's a great way to look at it also. And it also, I think, listening to all of you, I'm understanding that there's a lot of diversity that you all have to deal with the kind of roles you have right now. And Michelle, in your perspective, it's a very internal view of it as well from an employee comms perspective. So, how does it all come together when you're talking about culture and you're trying to bring people together, which probably represent very diverse cultures? How does that all come together? How do you manage the kind of change communications and the different aspects of bringing people from such different diverse backgrounds together into one corporate culture? How does that work?
So, I think, and I think that is a very interesting question. I think we live in a time when everybody has different priorities. Worlds have shifted. The power has shifted, where the companies no longer need to care just about our investors and our stakeholders, but the employee's voice has become such an important power. I can tell you, as much as we, for example, would like our people to come back to the office, in the surveys, the folks have said, no, we have demonstrated that we can be productive, we can deliver those results, and we want the flexibility. So we had to evolve our strategy based on that. So I think that's a very, very big shift as I think about 5 years ago, I guess, to today. And I know that not all the companies could work with with what our employees want and what can we offer. I know that in discussions with various companies, there is a mandate that, okay, that this is what we would like, and you got to follow it. But in many cases, more and more companies are seeing that. There is power in our people, and we need to take care of the folks in our own house. As I think about what has worked for me, over the past few years, and not just to look just at employees, but I think a big part of it is a lot of what the way that you treat your people, given the big burst of social channels. If you don't treat your people right, there is a high chance that they would go out on LinkedIn or on Twitter and could say something out there. So I think you always need to keep that lens in mind. What do you say internally? Is there a possibility of it going externally out? So I think you always, and that's what I mean when I say that lines are blurred. While you may be in an internal and a change and a purpose role, you need to keep that hat on. I think as I think about the four or five things that have worked for me, I think whenever I devise a communication plan, and whether it's an employee, a change, a social media, or a media plan, it has to be rooted in business goals. It has to be rooted in data and insights. Listen to what your people are telling you. You have to find a creative way of telling their stories, whether it's introducing a new platform, and always keep the hat of less is more. I think that's one. I think the second thing, as I think about it, is whatever internal platforms we launch, we always have the hat of having an integrated communications approach. How do you slice and dice the communication that you have for your various audiences? I think that is a critical one. Ensure that the leaders sort of demonstrate the culture and the behaviors that you want, that you ask your people to. I think that is a critical one, and that is something that we work with our leaders a lot to say, that if you want, for example, folks to come to the office, you need to demonstrate that. You can't ask your teams to come to the office, but you're at home. No. So I think that's an important one. I think the other one for me, as I think about a culture, and the big part of it is collaboration. Sitting in a global role, you need to know when do you not outstretch your arm, because the regions are in roles for the roles that they are in. They are experts on what works in their local markets, and you need to keep that in mind. At the same time, being in global roles, my role is to ensure that there is a framework. We work within the guidelines, whether it's equipping them with communication toolkits, helping them to understand where do we want to go, what is our strategy. In fact, we just launched our new vision. We have our investor day, and we just launched that, and you will see that the next few years for us at Mondelez is going to be the time when we look at our evolution, at our portfolio, and so on and so forth. So that simply means that there will be some changes. And to help people to prepare that, ensuring that our people understand what is the vision, what is the strategy, and ensuring that we listen at all times is very, very critical. Change is hard. And I think for anyone to be part of in that transformation zone, the question that every person will ask is, what's in it for me? And as long as you help to answer that particular question, the chances that your employees will adapt, will adopt, and quickly and willingly be able to do, I think, what our desired goal would be is higher. But you need to ensure that you answer the question of what's in it for me. I
Right.
think that's been a fundamental one.
Sure, sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And Karun, I know we're going to lose you in a few minutes. So my quick last question to you before you go away, something that's really intrigued me also is this whole space of crypto, Web 3.0, and this whole parallel universe of media also that has now shifted into that space. So, I mean, globally speaking, and you have a bigger perspective on this, and we're still learning the ropes out here in India, it'll be really interesting to get a broad sense from you as to where you think this is headed from a communications perspective. Where are NFTs headed to? Is this a bubble that's waiting to burst? Is it a wave we're riding, or it's here to stay? So tell us a bit about that.
No, super. I mean, this is a really interesting question. I think I'm maybe a little bit biased because I'm a little bit of a crypto or
We'll
BTC or
allow you that
NFT
bias.
an
We'll allow
NFT
you that bias, but we'd love to enjoy your
an NFT maxi a little bit. But I think I think what Web3 generally is doing, not just for businesses but for people more than anything, is it's really empowering an individual to do what they really want to do and be in control, not just of their identity, but how they monetize their brand or their identity. And you're already starting to see this. I think the, what you're starting to see in the media is a great sort of microcosm of what's happening at a broader level, which is brands today have to take control of their own narrative, right? I mean, brands are starting to rely less and less on mainstream media. Yes, it's still important, but you're starting to have places, either it's on social media or on their own blogs and websites as well, which become their newsroom. And as you start to do that, what you end up doing is you're building a community. You're building a community of consumers, businesses, whoever you end up transacting with or engaging as a brand. It could even be policymakers and other sorts of stakeholders as well. But as you start to think about community from that point of view and how do you engage them at a more deeper level, I think that's really the push that you're seeing with Web3. It's communities at the center of it, culture. I know Michelle brought that up as well. culture is at the center of it as well. And I think that's where you're going to see the momentum that's already building with NFTs, etc., continue to grow moving forward. Yes, there's still a lot of question marks around it and crypto and everything in general, but around what's happening in the Web3 space is actually far greater than just crypto or NFTs. It's all about community and culture, and giving ownership back to those people that want to take ownership of it. So, I mean, a really simple example of this today is, anything you do on Twitter, anything you do on any social media platform is eventually controlled by that platform. It's why Donald Trump or somebody else can get banned from a platform like Twitter. But with the advent of Web3 and it becoming more and more mainstream as we move along, people are going to have that opportunity to be their own voice, to be their own brand, and think about how they engage and monetize what they want or their services with anyone around the world in real time. And that's underwritten by everything that's happening in crypto as well, with a significantly larger level of transparency than we've ever seen before. So I think transparency, being able to do things in real time, and ownership are going to be some of the core pillars of this space. And I think the brands or businesses that are quicker to adapt and embrace this are going to come out just stronger on the other side.
I think it's very exciting and it's an ever evolving world. And I think that is where all of us as communications professionals need to keep ourselves on our toes. Just the minute you think that you know it all, and then there's something else that comes and you have to unlearn it and then learn it again. So that we have some questions now from the audience, which we'd like to share with all of you and get your feedback on. And I think my first question, I think the apt person probably would be Arpan, because you've just recently made the shift to a global role. And the question here is from Shubham, and he's asking, how can we as individuals get more familiar and compatible to the global environment? How do we work on exposing ourselves to how external comms or how communications works from a global perspective, starting now in our careers?
First and foremost, I think, is to keep an open mind. And the other is, just don't get limited by what is happening around you in the country that you are in. Open up your minds, your perspectives, track, read. I think reading is the most important part. I mean, like the good old days, they said, read a book and you can see the world through a book. I think so. Now books may not be as relevant, but read. I mean, catch up on trends, figure out what is happening around the world, because when you read and when you're informed, you are also informed about the opportunities. Second, I think, don't just be very, very focused on getting a global role. Excel at what you're already doing currently, because opportunities as you go along in your career will open up. I mean, if you're at a job, don't ignore that just to go global. I mean, going global will happen eventually, but there are lots of positives that are in India, by the way, and what India does and what India provides you. So it's not like if you go global, everything is rosy. It's not. I mean, they also come with their own set of challenges, but I think be open to cultures, be open to accepting change, be open to consuming more information and catching up on trend. These are some of the most important things. And I think the other thing is, some of our organizations provide opportunities for us to go out. So be informed about them, track them. You know what role suits you, what role doesn't, what is it that you want to do going ahead. Keep a tab on them. And if you're able to keep a tab on them and get some of them to work for you, nothing like it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to follow our passions and follow the roles rather than groom for a potential international opportunity, which should come naturally along the way as well. So, completely agree with you on that. Anubhav, would love for you to take this one. This question is from Ayush. Ayush is asking whether working in an international environment means you're stepping into a culture and a set of expectations that you're not familiar with, and how, as an individual, we should be ready for some unexpected things as well, and how do you deal with those challenges. So it all sounds very rosy at the face of it, but we're sure when you started out in a new environment there were those challenges. You must have seen it. Could be something as small as language issues, but what is the reality of it really when you get
Yeah,
out?
love the question, and I love this topic actually. So the first and foremost thing is we need to acknowledge the fact that we are Indians. We live in and breathe in a diverse society. We are naturally born and brought up in a society where we acknowledge other cultures, where we know how to adjust the way we communicate based on the sensitivities of the other cultures, right? So it is ingrained in each of us. So know that first, right? The second thing is when you move into another market, right? It's the one way is, of course, it is a different dynamic because people are different, right? But if I go back to my journey, I think the first year in a new market is all about absorbing. It's a different way of working, and once you're able to get attuned to the way people work in the market, the way they approach different things, and that could be a very steep learning. And going from my own journey, I can tell you that in office, and we always had people around us. We always had a Vinay ji and a Datar ji to help with faxes and couriers at that point of time. Moving into Singapore, everything was you have to do it on your own. We didn't have any office boys running around helping us with basic stuff. And at times you were like, am I supposed to do this? I'm too senior. Is this what I'm supposed to do? And you have people looking at you and like, is there something wrong with you? This is the way we work. So it's essentially, the first is the culture adapting, being able to adapt to that culture. The second thing that I felt and I still feel is when Indians move and start working into the other market, right? It comes with that thing of, we get very excited. We are very passionate generally about everything that we work around. And we also want to do things fast. And that's in our nature. Sometimes in markets, it's looked at as being aggressive, for example, and everything that people would do would essentially be routed through, oh, Indians are aggressive, for example. But so my own journey through it, and when I see people come in from India and come in and try and settle in, my 2 cents to them is just this: go with an open mind, absorb. We have in each of us the ability to adapt to different cultures, so we will get it eventually along the way. But just absorb and understand what's that mindset and what is the environment that you're working in. The second thing is we are very good. I have seen some of the best communication professionals who are Indians. I still say very proudly that what we did in our foundational years, in my first 6 years, back in Genesis, I have not seen that level of work, that depth of intelligence and consistency in results being done and mapped at that level anywhere in at least in my 16 years here. So know that you're good. You come from an environment which is very sound. Just be open-minded, culturally sensitive, and you will get along the way. You'll be fine.
Thanks a lot, Anubha. I think you really spelled it out threadbare, and that's what we all want to hear. It's very nice to hear the bigger macro picture, but when you break it down to even small things like what's expected of you in your first year of work internationally, it is a big deal, and we all should know about it. But Bharat, I mean, just coming to you now with the next question, while we want to make sure we are not typecasted as a certain kind of an employee, I'm sure we should also be aware of not on the other side typecasting others as well. So the next question comes from Apeksha, and she's asking how we can sensitize ourselves and our communications according to various cultures that we are addressing geographically, and we have diverse audiences who we're addressing when we're in international roles. So how do we make sure we also wear that unbiased hat, not to categorize and generalize?
Sure, I think that's a great question. I think I'd also start by saying, in addition to what Arpan and Anubhav just said, I think this question also has something related to what they've said, and I think look, you will be very successful in an international career, and I hope you all get one, if you stop romanticizing the opportunities that supposedly come with it. So in many ways, it's counterintuitive, and many ways it can also blindside you. So the moment you are happy with what you're doing, as Arpan said, happy in what you're doing and what you're contributing in terms of value addition to whatever part of the business that you service within a company or within an agency, you'll start to recognize that the opportunities just flow. And when they flow to you, you're not going to go away, thinking that, just being carried away into Lala's land. On the other hand, you'll be actually looking at it with a lot more of I'd say, a strategic mindset as to what you can do now with the opportunity that you've been dealt. So that's my first point. So don't romanticize it. It'll help you adapt quicker, because there are a lot of notions that we have growing up in India about what it could be to work overseas, and many of those notions sometimes are sadly myths as well. I think the other bit I would say is to be flexible. And when I say flexible, I mean your ability to adapt to a particular cultural context is not something that will happen overnight. It's not something that anybody can teach you overnight. Right? It'll come with time. It'll come with your ability to sort of gauge things and observe things. So if you're yourself, you will start to sort of absorb all of these things in an organization as complex and large as Coke or companies that I've worked for in the past. And those observational skills will really teach you how to behave with under other individuals. And not all of them come with the same sort of cultural disposition as you think, or we might think, given that what we are exposed to on television, etc. We have a certain vision or a certain visual, should I say, of how people are. And that changes dramatically, especially in companies that employ people from every part of the world. So I would say the first thing would be to observe, absorb, respond. More often than not, we react, and that's a problem, because I think that comes with some amount of our own cultural sort of exposure, where we tend to react a lot more than we respond to certain things. I would also lastly say that the ability to understand another individual is greatly dependent on how well you understand yourself. So your awareness of who you are in a social context is extremely important. And it's time to spend a lot of time doing so, because there are courses available and you can do a whole bunch of these things and go back with key takeaways, etc. But unless you're put in that situation and sort of like put your skills to the test, you will start to not perhaps see all of these blind spots. And that's something that's happened to me on several occasions. And it's taken some effort for me to sort of like mold myself, to adapt myself, to learn there are certain things I can avoid doing over a period of time. You become more credible as a result, and it also makes you more self-aware. And I think these would be the 3 or 4 broad things that I would say to your panelist question, would be my response at least. Thanks.
No, I think that makes it really very real to us, and it's absolutely the idea is to stop romanticizing and have those visions of what an international career is like, and take it for what it is, and make the most of it. Michelle, this question comes to you now from Chabi. Stepping into an international role is definitely an exciting opportunity from a career growth perspective, but from in your mind, what are the real challenges one should be prepared for as well? What has been your experience?
Huh. Good question. I think all of the speakers before, I think, have touched on a couple of them. I think the biggest thing that I will say is read the price tag. There is a price tag with every role, right? So I think a big decision in the international roles are, and I think it comes to first is, what do you want in life? You have to be very, very clear. What do you value in your own life? These international roles means that it also has an impact on your family, on the role of your spouse, on your kids, etc., depending on the life stage that you're in. So I think you have to be very, very thoughtful. Thanks to the pandemic, I have not seen my folks for 5 years, and it's been the longest time that I have not gone back to Bombay, and I miss it. But that's one. I think the second thing, I'll say that is, I think we I think at times we Asians, specifically Indians, and I think, and Butter touched on this point, is we tend to listen less, and we listen to, I think we hear to respond than to listen and learn, right? And so we're very quick. And I think that is something that I have caught myself quite early on. I still remember when I was in Singapore, I think the more that you are in these regional and global roles, you tend to be more, I think, more attuned to catch if someone is saying yes but they mean no, or if a person from another market wants to say something but is not, or is shy, is timid. And I think the journey of moving and working with folks from from different parts of the world, I think it forces you to introspect you, especially as you grow into leadership roles, because you want to ensure that your team, that you're taking the team along, and you're not that passionate. There is a difference between being passionate and being tone deaf. You know what I'm saying? And I think that those differences, I think, are one. I think some of the other challenges, I think, stem from sometimes lack of knowledge, just not knowing enough about the country, right? And so, like, I would get like way I remember I was in a conference and I was speaking, and at the end of the conference there was a senior guy who came at me saying, you are from India and you don't have an accent, and you speak so well. And I'm like, and I love these because for me it's a moment of education, and I love it. Like, if you tell me anything about my country, I'm going to be like, sit down, boy, and let's have a chat. But I think these are amazing moments and opportunities for us. I think the second one that I get is, like, your name is Michelle, so have you changed your name, like, to Korea? And I'm like, no, like, that's my name. So I think um, there are these things that you get, but I think sometimes it just stems from lack of education. But you also need to be aware of who you are. I mean, I take great pride in being an Indian. We do have a word that we use in Bombay called jugad, which essentially is used in negative connotations. Oh, and so, but just because I love you a lot, and I'm going to say that he did some jugad and he got from point A to B. But what is jugad? Jugaad is essentially an approach to problem solving, right? Where you have to use limited resources, in a creative way. And if you take that same thing and you put it to your life, and I think that's what we all do. I think when you journey, I think one of our superpower of people who have been in these roles is adaptability. And sometimes it's easier said than done, because right from food to cultures, like, this is the first time. And when I came to the US, I think just adapting and helping your families to adapt, whether it is in a school, which is a new environment, or whether it's your home, or just learning the people, learning the culture. Like, the culture in the company that I have worked for, the culture in Monsanto was very different in the culture from Mondelez. So I think it's just different. It's listening is very, very important. Don't be eager to show who you are, because they will know you, and your work will speak for yourself. I think that's the number one thing. So I think I think that for me, would be some of the things you need to know. I think the other thing that I would say is, don't be too eager to please your bosses. Especially when you are in the headquarters, you have access to all these executive team members and so on and so forth. And that is sometimes that I see that, and I think it will come. It will come. I think you need to be patient. Focus on your work, and the rest will follow in most cases. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now we have just about 5 minutes to go, and I want to wrap with everyone just giving a very short nugget. I know as communications professionals, it's very hard for us to be short and summarize, but let's attempt it anyway. Just one takeaway from you at the end of this conversation on what is it that all the young people who are watching today should take away in terms of aspiring to be a global communications professional. What will it take, or what's your piece of advice for them? So let's start with Anubha and move on to Karan and the rest. Anubha, quick one.
Sure. Three
Yeah,
things. One is mindset, two, persistence, and three, networking. Go for it.
lovely. Thank you. Karan, on to you.
Yeah, no, I think I really like the 3 points that Nubar raised, and I would just say, just be focused. I think you can't overvalue or the amount of focus that you need, and the energy that you have to put into doing hard work, right? I think hard work pays off in the end. I think PR and comms is just generally, it's a there are times when you're under a lot of pressure, and it's important to be able to take that break and just make sure you remain focused on what the end goal is.
Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely. Arpan, on to you.
Um, I think just excel at whatever you're doing. Focus on what you're doing. Do it well. Opportunities will come along the way. And I think just keep your eyes and ears open so that you know what the developments are all around you and you can tap into them at the right point in time.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Absolutely. Bharat.
Often people say, someone's very lucky. Yes, luck is a factor, but so is the idea of opportunity creation. So you can develop a set of skills that are valuable to an organization, put it to the test, hone them over time, and things will start flowing your way. Thanks.
Great, great. That makes absolute sense as well. Last word, Michelle, and we wrap up right after.
I'd say be yourself, and network. That is important.
Great. I think we've had some really valuable and honest opinions. I think the honesty that came through was, to me, the biggest value add, to be honest, and I'm sure for everyone else as well. If anyone would like to add any last few words, and then I'll hand it back to Anubhuti, but just wanted to say a big thank you to all of you coming from extremely different time zones, of course, and being part of today's session. We really, really appreciate it, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Anubhuti, on to you for a conclude, and we're done for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Neha, and what a wonderful discussion this was. Thank you to our panelists, Anubha, Arpan, Bharat, Karun, and Michelle for joining us today and sharing these valuable insights. Congratulations once again on being part of the Reputation Today 20 Global Indians class of 2022. We thank Wordsworth Communications Consulting for their support in bringing this list out. We will see you soon with more such opportunities of learning. Meanwhile, I hope you have signed up for Praxis, which is scheduled between 5th and 7th of August in Chandigarh. Visit praxisonline.in for more information and to sign up for the summit today. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Quite rare to have an event of this magnitude.
It is an absolutely dynamic group of people, the programming, the talking, the organization of it, all of it.
I often tell my CEOs and stakeholders is that sometimes you have to tell the story better, but most of the time you have to make the story better.
I especially loved the theme, which was trust. I feel like the world is largely lacking in trust right now.
Our discretionary effort steps up every time somebody trusts us. The basic fact being, we don't want to let that person down. It's a fact that we do our very best when our bosses put a hand around our shoulder and say, I trust you.
There's been some fabulous speakers, especially today, not only informative, but highly entertaining.
Brand loyalty is something that's completely different from what it was even 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, really. And it's something that we as communicators need to strive for in terms of our end goal.
Take some risks in this market. Continue to evolve the discipline of public relations.
We use communications to help drive a business outcome. It's not enough to be tactical. We have to be strategic business people.
You want to get out there, you can't just do it in a vacuum and expect people to pick up on your message. You have to see what are people talking about.
Ramayana and Mahabharata were written to communicate communication. How do you communicate a complex idea to an ordinary people?
about the next 5 years, I think you can only predict change, and more change. And that comes from being open-minded and looking for those new trends and how you can work with them for yourself, for your clients, and for your career as well.